In New York, G-Shine's name moved through two very different worlds at the same time, the streets and the music industry. And those worlds didn't always play by the same rules. On the streets, G-Shine functioned as a real alliance, shaped by territory, incarceration, and hierarchy, especially inside Rikers Island, where reputation wasn't built on lyrics, but on presence, enforcement, and survival. Status came from who you were connected to, what you stood on, and what you could defend. In music, however, G-Shine took on a symbolic life. Rappers referencing blood identity often amplified the image, colors, language, affiliations, without necessarily carrying the same obligations or risks. For fans, it blurred the line between culture and structure. For the streets, that blur created tension. Law enforcement later pointed to this overlap, arguing that music sometimes became evidence, not expression. Lyrics cited in indictments, videos used to establish associations, and social media posts used to suggest hierarchy that didn't always exist in real life. The streets didn't move at the pace of albums or clout. Music could travel worldwide overnight. Street consequences were immediate and local. That disconnect led to misunderstandings, internal friction, and false assumptions, both inside the culture and from the outside looking in. By the 2000s, indictments and RICO cases showed the divide clearly. Some names lived in lyrics, others lived in court documents. Same labels, very different realities. This is where myth and documentation collide. Follow for breakdown separating culture from case law. Did music strengthen G-Shine's influence or confuse it? Buffalo, New York. The feds didn't just arrest individuals, they took down a whole crew. Federal prosecutors used RICO to indict members of the 110 gang, also known as the Bailey Boys, named after Bailey Avenue on Buffalo's east side. According to the indictment, investigators said the group operated as a criminal enterprise tied to drug trafficking, illegal firearms, and retaliatory shootings. Prosecutors alleged members worked together, dealers, shooters, and enforcers, all protecting territory and money. This wasn't built off rumors. The case used wiretaps, confidential informants, controlled buys, surveillance, and gun recoveries, tying multiple defendants to the same weapons and violent incidents. Instead of charging one shooting at a time, the feds mapped the entire structure, then charged it all at once. That move shifted the case from street court to federal time, where parole doesn't exist. This wasn't just a Buffalo arrest, it was a reset of the East Side.
After a man was stabbed to death. It happened just before 1 this morning on West 1.
10-year-old boy has been charged with killing another teen on a subway platform.
The plea came after the shooting death of an 18-year-old
boy.
Children running for safety. This happened in the Bronx.
Operation Drilly was launched in 2022 after a spike in retaliatory shootings across the Bronx, driven by drill-era beef spilling into real violence. Prosecutors targeted members of the Drilly/G-Side crew, a blood-aligned subset operating in areas like Soundview and the South Bronx, with documented ties to the sex money murder lineage. The investigation charged over 20 defendants with conspiracy, attempted murder, weapons possession, and gang assault. What made Operation Drilly different was the evidence. Law enforcement used music videos, lyrics, Instagram posts, and drill diss tracks to map rivalries, alliances, and alleged acts of violence. Lyrics weren't the charges, but they were used to corroborate timelines and intent. According to prosecutors, drill music became a digital trail. Videos identified locations. Lyrics referenced shootings before police reports were public. Social media erased the line between performance and confession. Operation Drilly didn't just arrest individuals, it marked a shift. The streets went viral, and the indictments followed. Who were these drill rappers? Sex Money Mafia, or SMM, was born in Soundview, Bronx during the early 90s when the drug game was shifting fast. Older organizations were falling apart, crews were popping up everywhere, and the streets needed structure. SMM came in with something different: discipline, hierarchy, and a business blueprint. They weren't just another set repping colors, they were a street enterprise built on money first, loyalty second. Their founder understood branding before branding existed. The name spread through neighborhoods like a warning. But what made SMM so powerful wasn't just aggression, it was organization. They moved like a unit, enforced order, and built a reputation the whole East Coast felt. The Bronx lit the spark, but the fire was just starting.
The Bloods didn't start in New York, they were born in LA, but when the 90s hit, the culture moved east. Locked up teens in Rikers Island began forming their own crews for protection. Out of that came sets like Sex Money Murder, 9 Trey, and G-Shine, each with its own rules, leaders, and street codes. What started as defense turned into dominance. By the early 2000s, the Blood sets controlled corners from the Bronx to Brooklyn. They had hand signals, bandanas, and a message: respect or get checked. But unity faded when money got involved. Sets turned on each other, and New York saw one of its bloodiest eras since the crack epidemic. Today, many members have traded street life for business and activism, but the red still runs deep in NYC history. Full breakdown on the way. Make sure to follow for more. Which NYC set do you think had the biggest influence? Comment below.
Most people know 9 Trey gangsters because of headlines, music, and one infamous cooperator. But long before that, 9 Trey was a structured street organization built on alliances and enforced rivalries. 9 Trey Gangsters, a New York-based Blood set, operated under the larger Blood umbrella but maintained its own leadership rules and territory. Like most East Coast gangs, survival depended on who you aligned with and who you stood against. Alliances often included other Blood sets and street crews that shared territory or business interests. These relationships weren't about friendship, they were about protection, money, and strength in numbers. Inside jail and prison settings, racial politics and blood unity usually dictated temporary peace with aligned groups. Enemies were more clearly defined. Rival Blood sets that broke rules, refused orders, or crossed financial lines became targets. Crips, traditionally long-standing rivals, remained enemies in most street and correctional settings. Conflict wasn't optional. Retaliation was expected to preserve reputation and authority. What made 9 Trey dangerous wasn't just violence, it was discipline. Orders flowed from leadership down, and violations were punished publicly to maintain control. That structure allowed the gang to grow, but it also made them vulnerable once law enforcement applied pressure. When indictments hit and cooperation entered the picture, alliances fractured fast. Trust collapsed, enemies multiplied, and internal loyalty broke, something gangs rarely survive. For the full breakdown of 9 Trey gangsters, their allies, enemies, and how it all fell apart, subscribe to OC Street Files on YouTube and catch the complete episode there. He managed some of the biggest names in hip-hop. But behind the music, federal prosecutors say he built a coast-to-coast drug empire. Jimmy Henchman, real name James Roseman, was one of the most powerful figures in the hip-hop industry. He managed stars like Game, Sean Kingston, Brandy, and Gucci Mane. But while he was building a resume in music, the feds say he was also running a massive bi-coastal cocaine trafficking operation disguised inside the entertainment world. According to prosecutors, Roseman used recording studio shipments, music crates, and road case equipment to move hundreds of kilos of cocaine across the country, then laundered the profits through shell companies and industry accounts. The DEA said his operation was structured like a corporation, with processors, couriers, security, and accountants. But the moment that took everything down wasn't just the drug case, it was the murder for hire plot. Prosecutors say Henchman ordered the hit on Lowell Fletcher, a G-Unit associate involved in a long-standing feud. The hit squad executed Fletcher in 2009, and Roseman was later convicted of orchestrating the killing. Once a major player in music and the streets, Jimmy Henchman is now serving life in federal prison. Hit that like button and subscribe. OC Street Files. Subscribers get priority on legal lifeline questions and paralegal perks. Follow for more OC Street Files breakdowns.